This tutorial will be focused on designing levels collaboratively. When you work in game development, especially at larger studios, you are rarely the only person working on a particular level. So I'm going to cover a few things that make it easier to collaborate on level building in Unity. When you're working with multiple people, the first and most important thing you'll need is version control. Version control allows multiple people to edit the same Unity project from different places. It stores a version of the project in the cloud that each person on the team downloads to their computer, edits, and then uploads their changes. If you're new to version control, I highly recommend starting with Unity's Collab tool, which is conveniently built right into your Unity editor, and you can access it from this dropdown right here called Collab. This is version control that Unity provides to make it easier to share your Unity projects with other people. To get started, you just click the Start Now button, and it will take you to the Services tab in Unity, where you'll need to create a Unity project ID. Once you do that, you will see everything in your Unity project will have these little plus icons on it. That means these are new files that are ready to be added to the version control repository. The Collab tab changes to have this up arrow, and that means that you have local changes that can be committed. Once it's finished processing this, the drop-down menu from this Collab tab should look something like this. It will give you a list of everything that you've changed. The first time you do this, you'll want to commit everything because you are creating the version-controlled version of your project. But after the first commit, what you'll want to do is carefully look through everything in this list and make sure it's things that you want to change. If there's ever something you changed that you did not mean to change, you would just click this icon here that says Revert Asset, and that makes it so that your changes will not be committed to the project. You should only use this if it shows you a file that you did not mean to change. Either you changed it by mistake, or Unity is marking it as a changed file even when you didn't want to change it. At the bottom of the Collab drop-down menu, you'll see this Invite Teammates icon. This is the next thing we want to do. We want to make it so that all of our teammates have access to this project. Only one person should do this step by creating the Collab version of the project, committing for the first time, and then adding your teammates. Then once you add all of your teammates, they will have access to the same project. I'm going to go ahead and commit my first set of changes with all of these added files, and up here is where you describe what things you changed. This is important so that all of your teammates will know what files were changed. It's not particularly important the first time because you're just adding all of the project files, but after the first commit, you'll want to be very descriptive about what you changed. So I'm going to make my description say, first commit, added all files. And then I will hit publish. It's going to ask if I want to save any any unsaved changes. And then it's going to commit the files. Now I'm going to add my teammates using the Invite Teammate button. Remember, only one person on the team needs to do this step. By committing the project initially and adding your teammates, you give everyone access to the same project. When you click Add Teammates, you'll come to a page like this. In this box, you'll type in the email address of each of your teammates, and then hit Add. It will show up as a pending user until they accept. Once they accept, you may notice in this Unity Teams access, it might say no, and you'll want to change that to say yes. This happens sometimes when you add a new person to a team and you want to make sure that everyone has access to the project. If you have too many people on your team, Unity Teams is only free for up to 3 people. So if you have multiple teams, or if you have a team with more than 3 people, it does cost money to use Unity Teams. So what I recommend is having a different person host the Collab project for the different projects that you're on. So anyone on the team can host the project, and I would recommend having someone host it who is not already hosting a different project. On the Services tab in Unity, there is an option for Collaborate. And if you don't see the Services tab, you can find it under Window, General, Services, and that will bring you to this window here. And there is a section for Collaborate. And inside of the Collaborate section, there is a History tab. And if you click on this link, it takes you to the Collab history, where you can see all of the commits that have been made. And you can see the comments for them here. And this is where it's really useful to let everyone on the team know what changes were made. If at some point there is a problem in the project where things are not working that were previously working, you can always go back to a previous version by hitting this restore button. This restores whatever was the version of the project at this particular commit. So that's how to use version control built into Unity. So now let's talk about how to work in the same scene if you have multiple people developing. Version control is really nice in that it allows multiple people to work on the same project. However, the one shortcoming is that you cannot have multiple people making changes to the same scene at the same time. You can take turns making changes to the same scene as long as each person waits for the other person's commit. You'll see this icon here will turn orange when someone else has made changes, and that's where you will pull their changes to your version of the project. As long as everyone takes turns, you can use the same scene. But a lot of times what happens when you are designing a level together is multiple people want to work on it at the same time. The best way I have found for doing this is to have each person work in a separate scene and then merge those scenes together. So here I have 3 separate scenes for each of my one for each of my teammates. I know it can be tempting to use your name for the scene that you are working in, but for organizational purposes, it is really beneficial to name your scenes based on the part of the level. So I have a scene called Bridge, which is for the bridge section of the level. In fact, if I open that right now, you can see that is the part of the level that this teammate has built. The city entrance, which is the main part with the buildings. This is this teammate's portion. And my portion is the forest, which I have not started yet. So I'm going to build in the forest section in my scene, which is called Forest. And then I'm going to show how to merge the work from all 3 scenes together. The one thing that's really important before you start building is to make sure that everyone is building on the same layout. So you should have a merged version of your layout in everyone's scenes, and it should have the exact same position and scale and rotation values. So this plane here is what has my layout on it. I'm going to show how I would set that up if I was making a different scene. If my scene did not exist yet and I was making a new scene, I would go to Game Object, 3D Object, Plane. I would locate my team's top-down layout, which we have drawn in advance. I would drag it onto the plane, and then I would set the values for the plane transform to match what everyone else on the team is using. So I would set my X, Y, and Z position to 0. And I would set my scale to 3, 3, and 3. This is the scale that my team has previously agreed on. And then I would save my scene to make sure that I know where everything is going to be. So if I were to check in all 3 of these scenes, I could choose the plane that has the top-down layout, and I would see that all of them have this 0 for the position and rotation and 3 for the scale. And that's the same in all 3 of these levels. So this is my level with the trees, and I'm going to go ahead and build my portion of the level. So Unity has in its package manager, it has a tool called ProBuilder, which is extremely useful for white boxing. If you have not used it before, I really highly recommend using this tool, ProBuilder. You access that from the package manager, which is under Window, Package Manager, and then you scroll about 3/4 of the way down and there is ProBuilder. And you would just hit the install button, which would show up here. I've already installed it on mine, but your install button would show up right here where mine says remove. So I'm going to use ProBuilder to whitebox my portion of the level. And the way you use ProBuilder is under the Tools menu, ProBuilder. This only shows up once you've installed it. So if you don't see this, that means you need to install it from the package manager. I believe only one person from the team needs to install it. So once one person installs it, they would commit that change from the Collab dropdown. I had it installed before my first commit, so it was already submitted with my first commit of the project. So Tools, ProBuilder, and then ProBuilder Window. This is the ProBuilder tool window, and the most useful thing here is this new shape, and I would hit plus here, and it has a bunch of different shapes that you can build. If you're building something like buildings or walls, probably you would start with a cube. It also has some useful options like stairs, and you can add curvature to your stairs. And my favorite for trees is to use cone because it kind of is shaped like a tree. And this would not represent the actual art. This just is a visual indicator that this is supposed to represent a tree. You can adjust things like the height and the number of sides. So you have a lot of control over what this shape looks like. Now, when it is tinted blue, that means it is in the shape editing mode. And if you were to just close out of this window right now, you would see the shape disappear. So what you actually want to do is hit the build button once you're happy with your shape. So you make changes to your shape. I'm just repositioning it so I can see it. The position it's in doesn't really matter. So once you're happy with your shape, you hit build and it'll turn white. That means you're no longer editing the shape. Now I can close the shape tool window, but I still want to keep my ProBuilder window open. There are a lot of fun things you can edit with the ProBuilder tool. You can select the individual vertices and modify those. So it has a lot of similarities to a 3D modeling software. You also have a lot of options in the ProBuilder tool window of things that you can change and edit. And it's a lot of fun to explore and see what all different things are available with this tool. For now, I'm just going to place this tree where I want it to be, and this is going to be the forested section around the edge of my level. Since I'm happy with this shape and I'm just going to be duplicating it, I will go ahead and close the ProBuilder window now. If you're ever working on your white box and you're sort of far away from where everything is, you can just select one of your shapes and press F, and it brings it to the center of your view. So I'm going to place this tree about where the forest meets the city. I know that one of my teammates is building out the city entrance, so I don't want to conflict with that, but I want to fill in my area that I'm responsible for, which is the forest. And so then I'm going to duplicate my trees with Control D or Command D on a Mac. And I know that I don't want the player to be able to escape from my level, so I'm going to make my trees really close together so that they even overlap a little bit. That way the player can't find a hole to get through. You can also select multiple shapes at once and Control D to duplicate multiple shapes at the same time. And since I have multiple people working on this level, it's pretty important to match the layout closely so that you are not conflicting with the work that other people are doing. If you are planning on making changes to the layout while you are building the white box, I highly recommend that you communicate those changes to your team before you actually make them, because it might impact what other people are working on. Okay, so I've built in the trees, the forest portion of my white box. And again, I'm working in the forest scene. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. When I hit Control S to save, you can see a new icon appears here that looks like a pencil. This means that I've edited this file that the version control software is tracking. If I go to my Collab tab, I can see this is the new test level that I was making to show how to do the top-down layout. And this is the level that I'm building my white box in. Now, if I decided I didn't like any of my changes, I would hit this Revert Asset button. Be careful using that because you can't undo that. So if you revert a file that you intended to change, you'll lose all of that work. Now, if you attempt to revert a file you added, it actually won't do anything. Because the way to get rid of things that you added if you don't actually want them, say I added this by mistake and I don't want to commit it, what I would actually do is I would just select the file and hit delete. And now it no longer shows up in my Collab tab. So if I'm happy with my forest changes, I would say updated white box for forest. And I would publish those changes. Then all of my teammates would get an orange icon up here, which means they have changes that they can pull. So now I have 3 scenes here that have the 3 different parts of my level. And I want to combine all of them into a single scene. So I'm going to make and this should be one person's responsibility to merge everything into a single scene. So I'm going to make a new merged scene. So I'm going to, you can actually start with one of the existing scenes and choose Save As, so you can rename it and make a new scene from this. So I'm starting with the bridge scene, and I'm going to choose Save As. I'm going to put it in my Scenes folder, and I'm going to call this Merged White Box with no spaces. So my merged white box has the level that I started from, the bridge, but I still have my other scenes and I still have the bridge scene. So I'm not going to modify the bridge scene or any of the other scenes. I'm only going to change this merged white box. And so what I want to do is I want to go to each of the other scenes. I'll find everything in the city entrance. And you don't want to take things like the main camera or any lights. What can be really helpful for your teammates is to make an empty game object and name it based on the part of the level. So I'd call this city entrance. And I, as the level designer for this portion of the level, I would select everything that belongs in this part of the level, and I would drag it to this city entrance. And so I also don't want to include the top-down layout with this because the merged white box already has a top-down layout in it. So I don't want to include the top-down layout, but I do want to include all of the other assets that I've added to my white box. So this makes it really easy for the person who is responsible for merging everything. So I'm going to save this change as if I was the designer for the city entrance. And I'm going to do the same thing for forest. So I'll make an empty game object called forest. And I'll select everything except the top-down layout, the direction light, and the main camera. If you had a first-person character controller in your scene, you would also not want to include that because you don't want to end up with more than one first-person character controller in your scene. So I would name that forest and save my changes. Now I'm going to commit this as if I was the designers for each of those levels. And now I'm going to go back to being the person responsible for merging everything. So I'm making this the merged scene. For organization purposes, I am also going to create an empty game object called bridge. This is the bridge portion of the level. And I was doing that in the merged white box scene. So now I'm going to go to the city entrance, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this city entrance game object that has all of the white box stuff in it, and I'm going to hit Control C or Command C on a Mac. Then if I go back to my merged white box and I hit Control V or Command V on a Mac to paste, and now I can see that I have everything from the city entrance in the exact spot where it's supposed to be. This worked out because all of the designers were building on the same top-down layout and had it in the same position and scale. So everything is positioned relative to where it's supposed to be in the world. I'm going to save that change, and then I'm going to go to the forest. Now I'm going to show a slightly different way of doing this, just so you can see that there's more than one option. Instead of just opening the forest scene, you can also drag a scene into the hierarchy, and now you'll actually see both scenes on top of each other. Now you'll notice it got a lot brighter because I have both direction lights in here. This does not actually make any changes to the scene. This is just so you can view the scenes at the same time. You can actually view multiple scenes this way, so I could also drag in city entrance. Now it's even brighter because all of these have their direction lights turned on. And this is just a way of previewing things together. I have not actually made any changes at this point. So I'm going to double click on forest to go to the forest scene. I now only have the forest scene in my hierarchy, and I'm going to copy the forest portion of the white box with Control C. I'm going to go back to the merged white box and Control V to paste. And so now I have all of the portions of my white box in the same scene, and I can save that. When I'm testing a white box, I like to use the standard assets first person character controller to test things out. My preference is the rigid body FPS character controller. When you add this to your scene, you do want to make sure that you turn off your main camera so that you know that your character controller is the only thing with the camera turned on. I noticed when preparing for this tutorial that the standard assets no longer appears in the asset store, which was a problem for me because I like using the first-person character controller for testing my white box. So I wanted to just let you all know that on the asset store page, if you go to My Assets under your profile, you can view all of the assets that you have previously downloaded, including the standard assets. So you can scroll through here until you find the standard assets that you have previously downloaded, and you will still be able to download it. If you've downloaded a lot of things before, like I have, you can sort alphabetically to make it easier to find. Actually, I probably would want to sort name descending. And it took me out of my assets. So anyway, you can scroll through to find the standard assets that you have previously downloaded from the asset store and access them that way. If you've never downloaded the standard assets before, you can probably find someone on the internet that is hosting them that you can download from. But for right now, Unity is no longer offering their standard assets through the asset store. So I have the first person character controller in my merged white box, and I can hit play, and I can walk around and see if this is how I want my level to feel. Now, probably I would want to do this test in an earlier version with just the top-down layout so I could get a sense for the size, and so I probably would have noticed already that this is a little bit too small, so I would want to go back and redo my top-down layout to a larger scale so that there's a little more space to move around. But you can get a sense for how to migrate everyone's work into the same scene and be able to test it out. A couple of important things to pay attention to is to look at the places where two people's work come together. So I had someone working on the forest section and someone working on the city entrance, and here I can see that there is a gap. And this is probably not large enough for the player to walk through, but this is something I would want to be careful of. Here's another gap here. And here's the gap in the forest. And it doesn't look like I can get through, but I can get stuck. So we would want to make sure that you can't have any openings in the level. So if I'm the person merging the white box, I would want to make a few tweaks to make sure that the level is closed in all the way around. So I might move a couple of trees here, or I might rotate this building a little bit, and I'm not trying to make any major changes to the layout. I'm just trying to make sure that the seams between the different sections work out well. This is also important from a visual standpoint when you start adding art assets to make sure that the visuals of each section line up. So I would also want to examine the part where the city entrance meets the bridge. This is another seam between two people's work. And so I would make some minor adjustments to bring everything together here. And then I would save my changes to the scene. And now if I go to the Collab tab, I can see the only change I have here is to the merged white box. So I would say merged all white boxes into one merged white box scene. And adjusted seams between sections. And I would publish that change. Now I have 3 different level designers work all in a single merged white box scene. So hopefully you found this helpful for working collaboratively on a single level with multiple designers. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.